When I was a young man in my 20s traveling, I'd get an apartment. I was still remember in Mexico City. I lived there for a year. Went out to the market and I bought a desk and had people carry the desk up to my apartment. And then I bought a bookshelf like the ones behind me, and I put all my books there. And I would come home instead of going out partying with my friends. I'd come home and I'd study for 2 or 3 hours. It was always study, always study.
We'd like to welcome everyone to the Brian Tracy Experience, the next episode. I'm Michael Tracy. I'm your co-host. I'm joined by my sister, Christina Tracy-Stein. Your other co-host.
Welcome.
Brian Tracy. Hey, Dad. How you doing?
I'm doing well, and thank you very much for being here. My favorite question when I talk to my friends is that if you could accomplish one goal in the whole world, what one goal would that be? And you tell us, and then we'll see if we can't give you some insights to achieve that goal.
You have one goal right now, Dad, that you're working on? Like, what's the number one goal you're currently working on?
Well, I have a book under contract on super learning.
Okay.
You learn more, learn faster, memorize things, speed read, how you can use your mind better. And it's based on years and years of research. I've done programs on it. I've read 20 or 30 books on it. I've taught it in 3-day seminars. But it's one of the most important things that a person can have is the ability to learn quickly and remember everything that you learn and then be able to apply it and get better results. So that's the reason for speed reading. And that book is under contract. My publishers are shaking the chains. Where is it? Where is it? Well, that's what I'm working on.
Yeah.
I want to hear your perspective. The question is, like, what are some of the lessons that Dad taught you, either directly or indirectly, that you passed down to your kids?
Well, I think one, obviously, my kids like to know what they're doing before they do it. So it comes up a lot where I say, everything is hard before it's easy. And you don't know how it's going to be until you try. And one of the lessons that Dad taught me when I was younger was that you have to try everything twice, because first time you try it, you're sort of thinking about it and you're over analyzing it, or it's just kind of a little bit bumpy. And so the second time you try it is actually your real first experience. So I tell my kids, you have to try new things, you have to try it twice, and everything is hard before it's easy. And then the other thing that I think huge lesson is just that you have to fail your way to success. You have to take action. You have to do things that not everything will work out the way you want it to, but you try, you do something and you recalibrate. I've had so many experiences with people, whether it's personal or with clients, where people want to be perfectly prepared and have it at 100% before they take action. And really, it's like, just get it to 80%. Get it to 80%, experiment with it, see how it's working, and then you can adjust and make it better. But if you wait until it's perfect, then you just never take action. And it's paralyzing. So I
internalized the first lesson, the same, but with different wording, which was Dad said, "Hey, Michael, no one starts out good at anything, and no one enjoys doing things that they're not good at. You're going to start out, you're not going to like it until you actually get good at it. So there's a period of time that you have to kind of suffer with your incompetence and kind of iterate and kind of feel forward until you finally figure it out. And then at that particular moment, you'll be like, oh, now I can actually enjoy doing it." Yeah.
Exactly. And there's something so rewarding, I think, when it's hard and when you question whether or not you can do it, and you push yourself to try, push yourself to work through it despite not getting reward. And then you finally get to it where it works. And suddenly it's like, I can do it. I didn't think I could do it, but I can. I just had to try. And I had to, have the willpower, the grit to get to the success.
Can I tell you a story?
Yeah.
Do you want to say something on your live stream, Dad?
Once upon a time in one of my sales seminars, a man came up and I had used the expression in what I was teaching. I said, this is not rocket science. I mean, anybody can learn to be really excellent at sales and double and triple their income just by learning and practicing these principles. So he came up to me and he said, I liked your comment about rocket science. He said, when I was a little boy, I loved rockets. I had rocket books and rocket toys, and I just loved learning about rockets. And then I got up and I went to college and finished college and I got a job in sales, and I was working away in sales. And I said one day about our product to a client or a customer, and he said, well, this is not rocket science. And it hit me. Would it be possible for me to get a degree in rocket science? So we went to the university he had attended, and he could take an evening and weekend course. It'd take about 2 years, and he could actually get a degree in rocket science. So he did. The next time he was with a customer, and the customer says, well, this is not rocket science. He'd say, you're right. I am a rocket scientist. It's a funny thing. The point is clear, is you, anybody watching this, could actually get a degree in rocket science.
There's a really funny like British skit, and it's a guy, he's walking around a party and he's like, so what do you do? He's like, I'm an accountant. He's all, that's okay. He's all, but it's not brain surgery. He goes, I'm a brain surgeon. And he goes to the next person and he's like, so what do you do? He goes, I'm investments. I do finance. He goes, oh, well, that's nice. But it's not brain surgery. He's like, well, what do you do? He's like, I'm a brain surgeon. Until he meets a rocket scientist. And he's like, I'm a brain surgeon. He's like, that's nice. He's all, but it's not rocket science.
Here's the point. The average person only uses about 3% of their intelligence. You could not use all of your intelligence if you practice 100 years, but you can double or triple the amount that you're currently using, and double and triple your income, your status, the quality of your work, the neighborhood you live in, just simply by learning and practicing. And what Christina said is really interesting. Most people try it once and say, oh, this is not for me. But it takes, according to Peter Drucker, the management guru, he said it takes about 4 to 5 tries to master a skill. One of my favorite people in the world is Jeff Bezos of Amazon. And Jeff Bezos started off with a loan selling books out of his basement. And today he makes $3,000 a minute as the second richest man in the world. And how did this happen? Well, he said, there's no such thing as failure. There's only feedback. And so whenever they had a mistake of any kind, they'd say, okay, what did we learn from this? What did we learn? What did we learn? Everybody was encouraged to think in terms of the lessons that every mistake.
Dad, so coming back, I just want to ask you a question, because this is about kind of exposing the multiple layers of the onion that is the Brian Tracy. So what do you remember an experience? Did you ever have a humbling experience on stage?
Actually, no. I've had experiences that were extraordinarily good and others that were just good. But the secret to my success is what? Can you guess? You know what it is. Preparation. That's the hallmark.
Prior proper preparation prevents poor performance.
That's right.
But Dad, there was one time I think that you talk about in terms of emphasizing the importance of preparation when you thought you were prepared for something, so you didn't spend as much time. Yeah. And if you got onto the stage, you kind of realized that you should have prepared more. And that's really where I think you learned the lesson.
I've had 2 experiences like that, both caused by fatigue. One is I flew from Chicago to London overnight and spoke to a banking group when I got off the plane. And I was shattered with my jet lag, and I even forgot the name of the company and the person who hired me. And afterwards, they said that was terrible. I still remember. The second time was when I, again, was traveling and speaking day after day. And I addressed a corporate audience. And afterwards, took me aside and said, that was very bad. He said, we're really disappointed in you. And I said, well, there'll be no charge. I'm sorry. I was just so tired. I forgot my lines. I forgot where I was. I forgot who they were. But it's happened 2 times in 4,000 talks.
At one point, Dad, you were traveling, 200 days a year, maybe more. I mean, you were really out there. I mean, you'd come home just shattered.
I remember there was a time too when you were traveling so much that it was kind of like, is he home? Is he gone? When is he coming home? When is he going to be back? That it was just hard. It was almost hard to keep track because you were such a jet setter.
Well, I've spoken in 68 countries. I should say spoken, that means I've spoken for money. I've been in 124 countries. I'm going to have my 125th in September. I'm going to Bogota, Colombia. That'll be my 125th country. Well, there's a saying that says, you have to make hay when the sun shines. If you have an opportunity, I call it like a fumble in a football game. You grab the ball and run with it. If you have an opportunity, you take it and run with it and do everything possible to make it successful. I have two philosophies with my customers, my clients, and you've heard it before. Before you ask, the answer is yes.
And then I have to run after them and say, no. Yeah, I think that's a wonderful philosophy, and we should always try to give our clients and partners everything that they want. We can't always say yes to everything.
In business, and everybody who's watching this probably in business of some kind, the critical differentiator is your customers and how they think and feel about you. Most successful companies are not ones that cut their prices. They're the ones that take care of their customers better. We were doing a conference yesterday with Christina and some very successful people. And I said, our job in life is to improve the life and work of each person that we speak to. And everybody just really liked that. It's a great motto. That's all we do is we think about how can we contribute. My friend Earl Nightingale, that every day you should wake up in the morning and say, how can I increase my value to my customers today? And your customers, of course, are the ones who pay your salary, pay your income directly or indirectly. How can I increase the value of my work to my customers today? It's the great question for success. If you ask that over and over, you ask your staff, you ask your friends, you even say to your customers, how can we improve the quality of our service to you? And that is the number one reason why people buy from you and buy again and tell their friends.
Third party lessons. So there's been like so many different times where you've said something to me when I was growing up, and because of our familiarity, I would discount it or ignore it. And then I'd hear it rephrased from somebody else, like a third party, and it would finally click, and I'd be like, "Oh, now I get it. Interesting." And I'm finding that, and I'm sure Christina has a similar experience, that when I try to teach my kids things, they're like, "Okay, Dad, whatever." But there's an old adage, and I'm embracing this as I get older, which is if you want your children to learn, don't try to teach them, but find them a good teacher. I feel like you did a good job with that, especially with finding me good business mentors. And I was specifically our friend, Bill Rowland. Dad, you would say something like, write it down. And Bill Rowland would say something like, if you show up to a training session like this without a pad of paper and a pen, it's like showing up or start trying to eat spaghetti with a spoon. You get a lot on you, but not a lot in you. But Christina, did you have an experience like that where, Dad tried to teach you something growing up and you didn't internalize it until somebody came along and said it just in a different way, and you're like, oh, that clicked. Like, now I get it.
I think for me, it was like a bigger trajectory because I got to a place when I graduated high school where I was like, I'm going to learn about psychology. And I went to undergrad and did psychology as my degree. And then I went and did clinical psychology. I got a master's in clinical psychology. And as I was going through that process and I was getting those degrees in the education, that's where I would see different things pop up. I think one significant learning experience for me was reading John Maxwell's books and having him quote Dad in that book and being like, oh my gosh, okay, so knows what he's saying. He's popping up in other places. But yeah, I feel like I went down my own path of psychology and training and licensing. And then I kind of came back to personal and professional development from like a different place of appreciation. And especially in terms of, Dad's work.
Can I interject here? Each person should have a learning space in their home or apartment. When I was a young man in my 20s traveling, I'd get an apartment. I still remember in Mexico City. I lived there for a year. Went out to the market and I bought a desk and had people carry the desk up to my apartment. And then I bought a bookshelf like the ones behind me. And I put all my books there. And I would come home, instead of going out partying with my friends, I'd come home and I'd study for 2 or 3 hours. I was always studying. And I would often rent a 2-bedroom apartment, 1 bedroom for the bed and 1 bedroom as my office where I would study. So each person, and I read it somewhere, each person has to have a learning space. It can be the end of a table. It can be anywhere, but it's a learning space that you go to and you say, and now I'm going to learn something. Give yourself a specific time, 1 hour a day, and so on. If you do that, then what happens is you get into the habit of breathing in and breathing out.
So, hey, Dad, I have a question for you, because this is something that really only you can answer, because you've kind of had this whole perspective. I think one of the questions that kind of initiated this question was, this gentleman asked, Brian, how did you go from being a construction worker at 21 to achieving what you have achieved? And what was the switch that flipped? Like, what was the mindset shift that had to happen for that to work?
Eating was the motive. Yes, eat food. I needed money to live. For many years, I could tell you how many pennies I had in the world at any time, because it was so few, so little. So I got into sales, and I struggled and struggled and struggled. And then I began to study the subject, which transformed my life. And I've talked about that. And I was so successful, people said, whatever you're drinking, recruit some other people and share it with them, because it's working. And I come up with some techniques that helped me get more appointments and close more sales. So I recruited one person and then two persons. And over 2 years, I recruited 95 people and trained them in how to sell. And they began to make money. Many of them today are millionaires.
Let's go back to, this is a very specific question from Akshay Bandy. And I think what he's asking is, what was that trigger event? What was it? Was it a mindset shift? Was it a unique experience? Do you remember what kind of like that? Was there like a paradigm shift at some point when you were?
There is a time when we say the nickel drops. It suddenly occurs to you that I can do it. I can do this. People are, I can do this. I can do it. I can do it. Once you get over that barrier, the number one reason for failure and underachievement is fear. Fear of success, but fear of failure, fear of criticism, and so on. But if you get over that, suddenly you're free. You don't care about other people's opinion. All you care about is being successful. So that's what I did. And then I decided, well, people ask me questions. Well, I'm going to learn. So I became a perpetual learner. I recommend, as you know, that you read 1 hour a day in your field. I was reading 2 to 3 hours a day in my field, year after year after year. The cumulative effect of continuous learning is extraordinary. Every successful person says, when they ask them, why are you successful? It's because I never stop learning and trying new things.
Yeah, I have a question. So you had a moment, you wanted to eat and you changed. So you decided to start, shifting your business. But talking about like the personal development space, because you really are a pioneer, right? Like you were one of the leaders in that space. What was the landscape? Like what was happening at the time? Like were other people speaking about positive psychology and personal development, or were you, did you put together the Phoenix seminar, obviously with your influences, but what was it like? Who were your peers at the time?
Well, there were people like Zig Ziglar and Dennis Waitley and Jim Rohn, and these people who had also put in years of study, and then they had put it together like ingredients in a recipe to create wonderful seminars. Massive turning points for me when the audio cassette industry came out, and I bought my first audio program on success and listened to it. And I couldn't believe it. This is so many good ideas. Do this, don't do that. And so then I bought another and another, and I went through every audio program for sale because I drove a lot in my work. And I listened and listened and listened and listened. Then I was already reading, but audio learning fills that 2 to 3 hours a day that most people drive. So instead of sitting there listening to the radio, is learn. And it's a perfect way. Now, how do you learn with audio programs? It's the pause. Is if you hear a good idea, stop it, and then turn the idea, like on a barbecue spit, turn it over in your mind and say, that's a great idea, and then continue.
Okay. I got a question. I'm kind of curious about this one. So nonfiction, what's the most impactful nonfiction book you've ever read?
It's a book on economics by Ludwig von Mises of the Austrian school, and it's called Human Action.
And then Human Action by von Mises. And then what is the most impactful fiction book that's had the most meaningful change in your life?
Really, there is not one. I cannot think of them. When I was younger, I read hundreds of fiction books. And as it happens, you don't really learn much from fiction. Fiction is for entertainment. It's for the storyline and drama and murder. I read all the Mickey Spillane books, Mickey Spillane was a private eye who with a butt of his gun, and I mean it was really violent books.
Actually, this is a rhetorical question because I think I know the answer, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
Because you recommended this book for me to read, which
Yes.
was Atlas Shrugged.
Oh yes, that I'm glad you mentioned that. Atlas Shrugged had an enormous impact on me. I was never the same again, and it led me to Action by von Mises, because von Mises and Ayn Rand were colleagues in New York for many years, and they went back and forth. But
With Alan Greenspan too. They were all buds.
yes, you're right. But I'll tell you, Atlas Shrugged, a friend of mine gave it to me when I was about 21, 22 years old, and he gave it to me for Christmas. I was my boss at that time. I was selling carbon paper from door to door, office to office. Anyway, this was his Christmas present to me, a book, a paperback book, and there was really no business over Christmas. So I remember I began reading the book sitting on a park bench not far from my residential hotel. And I sat there and I became so entranced by the book. I read it hour after hour, and I got sunburned worse than I ever have in life myself in the book. I would recommend, because we've all read Atlas Shrugged. What it does is it's called the theory of objectivism. Reality is, don't try to go against reality. Things fall down, they don't fall up. And that's what Ayn Rand teaches, but it's much, much more than that. And you're never the same again, in a very positive way. For example, one of the things that it said is that reality is wonderful. And so you don't need to drug yourself with pot and drugs and alcohol and so on. You need a clear mind so that you can really enjoy reality. From that point onward, I did not use any drugs, but from that point onward, I never smoked or touched dope of any kind, because Ayn Rand said your mind should be clear so that you can enjoy reality. I love the theory. And she also said, which is a major part of my teaching, is that each person is responsible for their own life. You're responsible for where you are today. If you're not happy, set a different goal. And the great majority of people, what we have found, Barbara and I especially, what we found is that probably 80% of people blame all the problems on someone or something else.
So Christina, I want to ask you the same question. Nonfiction and fiction. Do you have something that resonates that?
Sure. So a pivotal book for me was Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman, because I grew up, like very sensitive and with a lot of feelings and not understanding kind of my emotional processing or just how to name feelings. So I was very I guess reading that book gave me a language that I didn't have beforehand. And as soon as I understood that there was like all of these different emotional experiences that people had, it was so empowering for me in terms of managing my life and my relationships and my education. And so that was really profound. And I think reading that book really set me on the trajectory of wanting to facilitate connection in relationships and helping people be really authentic in their feelings and transparent. So that was a really significant book for me. I love Daniel Goleman. I love all the emotional intelligence stuff.
I read the book when it came out as well, and I agree with you. It was an extraordinary sort of discovery is that there's school intelligence, but there's emotional intelligence, and that's a gut feeling. If I could add to this, and this is something that women are much better at than men. Our wife of my son went to a 3-day talk, which is where they sit and they go through a process of learning mentally and emotionally. Anyway, when she came back, I said to her, "What did you learn in your 3 days?" I always ask that. what did you learn in your 3 days? And she said the equivalent of trust your gut.
Yeah.
Is that listen to your heart, listen to your stomach, and if that says do it, do it. If it says don't do it, don't do it. You may not have an intellectual or rational answer, but just listen to your heart, and that will. And then the more you do that, the better your intuition becomes. Successful people are ones who make intuitive decisions. They say this is the right thing to do. But yes, what about this and what about that? No.
There's a book called Trust Your Vibes by Sonia Coquette, and it's awesome. She talks all about it. She teaches you how to cultivate your intuition and really connect to like when you're having a feeling and noticing the energy in your body and noticing like kind of how to interpret that as a message from your intuition. But it's a great look. I've taken the concept with my kids to when they're trying to make decisions, and we use the term like, well, trust your vibes. Like what is your gut telling you, and decide on that. If your gut, and this is really helpful, I think, for parenting teenagers, right? Is like you can't be there all the time. You can't help them make every decision. So the goal as a parent is to help them be able to make good decisions on their own. And one of the things we talk about is, look, you will know if it's a good choice or a bad choice. You will have a feeling in your body. If you're thinking about something and your stomach gets tight or you start to feel uncomfortable, that's your intuition telling you it's a bad idea and that you have to listen to that because, and parents are not always around, but the more we tap in and trust that part of ourselves, we make better choices.
Yeah. I do the same thing when it comes to desserts. If you have too much, like you're the one that has to live in your body. You're gonna feel it. So listen to your body, listen to your intuition. That's something that, I don't think you can actually teach that. You can't like read it in a book and then it just intuitively. You almost have to encourage it and cajole it out of somebody.
There's a special technique that I've taught over the years and practiced. Not enough, but it's so powerful. It's actually scary. But what you do is if you have a problem that's concerning you, and it may even be money or health, or usually we see most of our problems come with hair on top. And so it's usually another person. What you do is you go and sit quietly. No music, just sit quietly. Outside is best, but just sit quietly for 30 minutes. Now, most people have never done this. One of the great French novelists says that most people have never been alone in a room with themselves for an hour or 2 hours. But for you, just take your problem. Say, what is the biggest problem or difficulty that's concerning me right now? So be clear about that. Then go and sit down and sit quietly for 30 minutes. Now, for the first 20 minutes, your mind's going to be tumbling, turbulent, and then suddenly it starts to clear. And it's at the 25-minute mark. I've taught this to people all over the world. And they come back and they say, it's astonishing. At 25 minutes, my mind clears and the answer appears. And it always works.
Dad, I've actually, just to offer some testimony, I've seen you do this, walk outside.
Oh, yeah.
Sit on a chair, look west. And it's like, hey, Mom, what's Dad doing out there just sitting, staring off the... So he's meditating. I've tried to do. It gets harder when you have these little kids running around. But yeah, I've done that too, and it is amazing when you can create some space, types of insights you can get.
It's what you said, Michael. You tap into the superconscious mind, and the superconscious mind has every answer to every problem that you'll ever have. But you have to listen to it. It's almost like a piece of music playing, but you turn down the volume so you don't hear it. You have to turn up the volume, and the way you do that is sit quietly by yourself. And at the 25-minute mark, all the powers of the universe start to flow into you. And most people who have become great because of listening to this mind. But you need to be clear, what is your problem? And then just sit and listen, and the answer will come.
So, Christina, to go back to the question, what was your favorite fiction book?
Well, I'll say my guilty pleasure is James Patterson novels. I love mystery and suspense. I think it's probably because, Dad, as a child, your favorite movies to watch with us were Rambo and all of those fun military action films that I find it very satisfying to engage in mystery and suspense novels. But yeah, I think I've read all the James Patterson books.
We have some questions from the audience. Can you please explain the purpose of life?
The quick answer goes back to Aristotle, the greatest philosopher in history. In 350 BC, he dealt with this question, and his conclusion was the ultimate aim of life is to be happy. And so you should organize your life so that you're only doing things that make you happy, which comes back to what we're talking about, listening to your heart. And your heart will always guide you to doing or stopping doing things that will leave you happy. And so you can always measure how good a decision it is by afterwards, are you happy? If you're not, change. And don't be afraid of changing. See, one of the things you need to do to be successful, and Rand wrote a book called The Virtue of Selfishness. Make your decisions based on what makes you happy, not somebody else.
Beautiful. Dad, do you have any plans this weekend?
Well, I love to read and learn and work, so that's what I do. I can't run around as much as I used to, but I have so many great things to read, including a couple of books that were just mentioned. And by the way, a reread of a good book is often much more valuable than the first time. First time the answers were new. The second time you're actually looking for the answers. You learn it at a deeper level. Peter Drucker is my dream management consultant, and I've read his book several times and underlined each time with a different pen with a different color, as you know. So read one of those books like The Effective Executive. It looks like a rainbow because it's just so full of colored pens. And that's how you learn stuff. I would leave one thing for our friends, is that whatever goal you set for yourself, there are no limits except the limit you place on your own mind. So if you don't place your own limits, then you have no limits. You can do and be and have anything you want in life, but you're going to have to work for it.
Yes.
All right, wonderful. So this concludes this episode of the Brian Tracy Experience. We will go through all of the comments and compile all of your questions, and we'll try to get to them on our next episode.
Hey, we love you guys. We love you guys.
Yeah, thank you for all your thoughtful comments, everyone, and for showing up, and we will see you again soon.